Hello, welcome to the Analyst Inside Cricket with me, Simon Hughes.
And me, Simon Mann.
It's the 27th of March, which means it's exactly a week to the start of the County Championship season. And we're going to talk county cricket today, and we're also going to talk the business of cricket because we have a special guest who I think has a real finger on the pulse of the business of cricket and the business of sport, actually. Tim Bostock, who is Chief Executive of Durham. Thanks for joining us, Tim. What's the first question is, what's the temperature like in Durham? Because I have these memories of getting warmed up for the season playing for Durham, and we had hand warmers and body warmers and overcoats and balaclavas. How is it today?
Well, it's 14 degrees, you'll be pleased to know. We're playing against your old university in our pre-season warm-up. We're putting up a really good fist. They've got a couple of really good players, actually. A couple of them scored hundreds. So our boys are getting a good workout. And from an England perspective, I can report that I've spotted Stokes, Carson, Potts all running around the outfield and doing various things this morning. So, they all look like they're on track as well.
That's good to know. But no sign of Wood, obviously, because he's a little bit more incapacitated, isn't he?
Yeah, Woody's, looks like quite a bad injury, that. So fingers crossed he gets himself sorted for the Ashes, I think.
Poor old Woody. I mean, he just brings, well, actually, and Stokes. In fact, all those guys, they bring such vitality to the brand, don't they? To the place and to the ground and to the other members of the team. I've seen them train. I've seen Woody, sprinting up and down, trying to beat the others in practice, even though he's not actually playing at the time. I mean, the buzz that those guys create around the environment must be brilliant.
Yeah, no, it is. And they're here all the time, which, I think I've said before, whilst obviously, Ben and Woody have been very involved with England for a long time. Potsy and Carsey are only really recent additions. But they're all here, they're all training, they're all very much a part of Durham. I think they're all like to play. It's a pretty full calendar. And as we've seen with these injuries, managing them through to what is a really massive sort of next two test series for England it's got to be the priority. I think Potsy's the one that's super, super resilient. But the irony is that Potsy's just not quite in that, first choice just at the moment. He's the one that actually looks very robust, very, very strong.
He's a real workhorse, isn't he?
Yeah.
Simon, you have different memories of Durham as not such a cold place, don't you?
God. Well, yeah. Well, I think it was the last time I was there. Actually, it was 42 degrees for that match against South Africa.
Centigrade.
Yeah. I mean, it's one of the most extraordinary days cricket I think I've ever experienced, really. And Rassie van der Dusen made that incredible ton. Anyway, well, what we need is kind of like a halfway house, don't we? Between 42 and 14. That's kind of like the perfect cricket weather. So, should we kick off, Tim, with actually talking about what should we start with, Yoz? Should we start talking about the county championship, red ball cricket, where it is at the moment, and where perhaps you, as a chief executive, would like to see it go? I mean, are we wedded to 14 matches for now and forever, or do you think that's something that could change in the future? And when those matches are to be played, could that change in the future as well?
Yeah, I mean, listen, this is a long-running saw. I sit on a group, the review group, that's looking at the 2026 schedule at the moment, which has been a little bit frustrating, but it's because these sort of groups are always frustrating, whether it was when Andrew Strauss was running the review or we've had so many reviews. And the challenge is trying to get everybody to agree, because everybody has their own individual sort of areas that they want to focus on, whether it be, no reduction of blast at any cost or no reduction of county championship at any cost, etc. So it becomes very, very challenging in terms of trying to get a consensus. So I have a particular view of where I think we should try and take the county championship and our schedule, which is only my personal view within that group. It's not the group's view. We're formulating at the moment 2 or 3 alternatives for the 2026 season. And then the process then will be that over the next couple of months, a bunch of us will consult with the whole bunch of key stakeholders, which will include people like yourselves and the media, our members, the fan groups, that are out there that are very vocal, quite rightly, about protecting what they regard as the most important thing to them, and then the players, etc. So that's the process. I mean, in simple terms, I think we'll have two options that, in my opinion, are just tweaks, and I think we'll have one that might be a little bit more radical.
And where do you sit? You said you had your own opinion, Tim.
Well,
I mean, are you
yeah.
allowed to put that forward here, or is it something you've got to keep quiet and just
That's
consult
the
with
only
others?
reason we've asked him on, because he's going to put it forward.
Well, let's hope so. Yeah.
Well, I think mine is probably the more radical one in terms of change, because I think we've been tweaking around the edges for long enough, to be perfectly honest, and I don't think anybody's really happy with it. In terms of the volume of cricket and trying to squeeze everything in with the competitions that we've got, it's becoming very difficult. And I think when we started off the process around 2026, the objective was for each of us to look at each competition and say, how do we make it the best possible domestic competition we can? That was the objective. So I actually have been looking at the county championship. So in my own eyes, I've been thinking about, well, how can we reinvigorate it? How can we make it more exciting? How can we make it more relevant to the England hierarchy, to be honest? How can we attract better players to want to play in it? And we've got something unique in the Northern Hemisphere. We've got tribalism, which doesn't exist anywhere else with our 18 counties, just by the very geography. Whilst Sheffield Shield is a very intense and high quality competition, they're miles apart because of the geography. Whereas, when Gloucestershire plays Somerset and Lancashire play Yorkshire, Middlesex plays Surrey, there's something there that's tangible that you can't throw away those 150 years. So I sort of think we've got an opportunity to make our county championship the sort of IPL of first class cricket, because quite frankly, if we don't protect it, first class cricket is at risk around the world. And then that feeds onto Test cricket, and Test cricket is the purest form. It's the one that everybody remembers, at least I do anyway. So, yeah, I would shake up completely the Champo. I'd bring in playoffs, championship final, and a relegation playoffs, promotion playoffs. All of those sort of areas that the traditionalists, and some sit on the group as well, obviously, who prefer first past the post. My proposal.
This is in two divisions or more?
Well, in simple terms, I'd have two conferences of 6. So 12 teams could win the county championship, and everybody would play each other twice in their own conference, and they'd play 2 games from the other conference. So the current proposal is 12 games, because one of the other issues is around a reduction in cricket. Okay, and I'm not necessarily wedded to reducing first class cricket. I do think that we've got too much cricket to squeeze in.
Here's the Cricketer magazine wall chart.
Yeah,
and it makes you feel ill looking at it.
Yeah.
Really, never mind tired. I mean, it's chaos, isn't it? And
yeah,
we had Sam Northeast actually on our podcast the other day talking about this, the captain of Glamorgan, and he had some quite interesting views on it. He doesn't want to see a reduction in championship matches as well, the number of championship matches.
So I'd have 12 teams that can win the county championship, and the top 2 would play off in a final, and the bottom 2 would play off for one team to go down. And then you'd have effectively a bottom 6. And I would have the top 2 playing off in a promotion final. So one goes up. So it shouldn't really be dead man's shoes in that bottom 6. Every year you'd have a 33% chance of getting to a huge promotion match, a little bit like, the Wembley weekend at football introduced a number of years ago, which is very popular. So there shouldn't be any thought that once you're down in that bottom 6, it's the graveyard, you're never going to get out, because quite frankly, you've got a 2 in 6 chance of getting out.
Is that a wicket that's just fallen there, or somebody getting 100?
No, it's a wicket, I think. Although one of the Durham Uni guys was 90 odd not out, so it may well be 100. But we've got a few people watching, which is quite good.
Yeah, I can tell. Yeah. Well, they're coming out. It's cracking flags in Durham if it's 14 degrees, isn't it?
Yeah.
They got their T-shirts off and everything, I can imagine.
Yeah. So effectively, I mean, that's quite a radical change from the traditional 2 divisions, first past the post, which obviously some people prefer. Whereas, I think the Ranji Trophy has a final, the Sheffield Shield has a final. I think we should introduce more jeopardy. So if I just look at those top six, the two conferences, which are a little bit like American, the two American NFL conferences where you do play teams from the other conference, you can tweak that. So my idea is we have a minimum of 12 conference games, and then you have a relegation, promotion, and effectively a championship final. So 6 teams will play that additional game. Which means that 6 teams play 13 games. Those playoff games should be played round about the middle of September, not any later than that. And all members should be able to go to those 3 playoff games free of charge. That's the grand first-class finale for the
And I
season.
suppose you want them on TV as well. I mean, that's another thing that makes sense.
It would be great if we get it on TV, but the streaming's so good nowadays anyway, and everyone's the YouTube platforms, all the rest of it, that we can make sure that. But it's creating that sense of excitement. And also, if you think about if you're in a conference of 6, that top conference of 6, and your objective is to finish first or not finish 6th and get dragged into that relegation final, there should be very few dead rubbers right the way through to the end of the season by definition, because you're pitching for one of those 2 places, which I think would be attractive. And also in the bottom 6 as well, you're trying to get in the top 2. That jeopardy should go on right the way through to the end, and that creates that sense of excitement. I think it gives it more purpose, and it's a proper breakaway from effectively the first past the post 2 division stuff that we've had for 20 odd years.
You mentioned there, Tim, 2 groups of 6. That only equals 12. So what happens to the other 6 counties? Do they?
Well,
they try to play each other.
So 1 from that bottom 6 will be promoted into the top 12. So the two bottom 6s in each conference play off in a relegation. So one of those will go down, and in the bottom 6, the top 2 will play in a promotion final. One of those will go up. Okay, so
it's a bit like having 2 Premier Leagues and a Championship with 6 teams below, in a way, is it?
Yeah, it is. It's exactly what it is.
Okay.
So one of the things you said, Tim, is that you're obviously arguing for something like this, and you said obviously there's debate within the working groups about what could happen. Are you in a small minority, or are you amongst people who are quite receptive to your views? I mean, where do you stand in terms of support within the group that could change this?
I think within the group. I'm minority within the group, to be honest.
No. I'm still here, yours.
Say that after consultation, wouldn't fly. They won't see it as tweaking, obviously, but whereas I sort of think it's tweaking. Versus I prefer to do something a little bit more radical. But I mean, listen, these are one of the challenges when you have a group of different people, all bound to have different views. So I think the important thing is we've got options. We've got safety first option. We've got sort of half a safety first option. And I think we've got a more radical option, which I think mine is obviously because we haven't tried anything like knockout red ball cricket before. And, promotion, relegation and a championship final. There's this sort of feeling around the integrity of the competition, 150 years first past the post. Well, nearly every major sport in the world, outside of football, but nearly everyone else has moved towards end of season playoffs, building to a real crescendo, creating a sense of excitement. We want to encourage to create some really, really big matches so that England players are encouraged to play, and the England hierarchy are encouraged to value some of those matches maybe a little bit more than they are at the moment. And I think trying to create a structure whereby you've got these 3 6s, the 2 top 6s, I think will create a lot more jeopardy. There should be a lot more on nearly every game. There should be very, very few dead rubbers. Now, the other thing as well, which I think you alluded to earlier, Simon, is, quite frankly, playing first-class cricket the first 2 or 3 weeks in April is ridiculous. And there are a number of reasons for that. Turgid, slow wickets. It's cold. It's not so much that it's wet, although obviously we suffered last year. But it's not conducive to, I think, what the England selectors may value. That's the first thing. Secondly, there are unintended consequences of playing so early. Yeah. So Sheffield Shield is final still going on. So New Zealand, Plunket Shield, South Africa. So some of the overseas players that you'd want to be trying to get in, the first 7 or 8 games. The counties are running around all over the place trying to get players for 1 or 2 games because there's that crossover. And if we started our first class season later, which we can do if we play slightly fewer games, I think that would ease that whole situation as well. So never mind the conditions that we're playing in early season, which are just not conducive, I don't think, to top class, first class cricket. You only got to look at some of the scores from last year to see that. I think there's a whole bunch of benefits around starting the first class season, round about the 20th of April, whatever that time is.
Well, that's what we always used to do anyway.
Exactly.
I mean, it's only been the last decade, I suppose, that, well, especially with the 100 being introduced, everything's been pushed back. In fact, in my day, we played Benson Hedges Cup, 50 over, 55 over early season. Would that work in April?
Well, I think I'd play a two-phase Metro. I'd start the season with Metro. So listening to what...
so the one-day cup, yeah?
The one-day cup. Okay, so I would play in two phases. So I'd start the season off with, say, 4 Metro Cup games, which it's Kookaburra ball, it's 50 overs, it's proper cricket, that you get in loads into the bowler's legs and batsmen can bat properly, all the rest of it. And you've got most of your players available that would like to play some cricket. Like some of your better players, only the IPL guys, probably won't be available, and there are fewer and fewer of those anyway. So you're serving up a really good product for the members. And this is quite important because I think if you've been stuck inside all winter and you suddenly get 2 weeks of nice spring weather that we're facing into now, I rather think we get some really, really good crowds for those first couple of weeks to start the season off, as everybody wants to get outside. The opportunity to watch Joe Root and various others who would, I'm sure, like a hit in those sort of competitions would be good. And then the second phase of that would be you'd play it under the 100, which is like a semi-skimmed version because it's your development squad and you add the 2 points together. So that would be my idea of the Metro. And the Marsh Cup in Australia, I've just come back from Australia, as you know, I spent quite a bit of time down there. They start their season off with the Marsh Cup. They've just finished their Marsh Cup off after the BBL, and then they're finishing the Sheffield Shield now. They do something very similar down there. So there's nothing wrong, I don't think, with having a split Metro competition. It also serves the purpose of some decent 50-over competition for some of our better players, which has been a criticism of what's happened recently with England's 50-over form. So it sort of ticks that box. And the 50-over sort of development phase, semi-skim phased under 100, has started to become really successful because more and more of those games are played on outgrounds. There's more of a festival field. We're playing at Sedbergh and South Northumberland. We're playing at York and Scarborough. Grounds that we traditionally, have sort of fallen by the wayside a little bit. So also, it creates a back to the future a little bit for some of that August stuff, which the members really, really like, the outground stuff. So I think there's a lot of benefit in having a split Metro. And then with the final of the Metro, I would absolutely go back to Lords and I'd have that in the middle of September. And the last sort of, my idea would be the last sort of 10 days of the season would be a Metro final at Lords, a championship final, a promotion playoff and a relegation playoff. And that's the season finish around about the 20th of September. That would be my ideal. That would be sort of how I'd see the flow of the season.
It sounds good. It sounds good. It sounds enterprising. Have you consulted with your members on this, or any of your playing group, or is this just you, or
No.
Are there more people feeding into this?
No. Listen, it's not just me. I could come up with all sorts of scatty ideas, but yeah, I've got a pretty forward-thinking group of people here, and some pretty influential people as well. So,
Mr. Botham.
Well, no, not him actually. No, I'm thinking more Marcus
Marcus
North.
North.
Yeah, and Ryan, and we've got some pretty high-profile players, and obviously around the scene as well. Marcus is very well connected with. I noticed Farby came out yesterday with something that was not a million miles away from what we've been thinking about. So this is not just me. There are a number of people that would like to see proper change, not just tweaking around the edges. But I fully respect there are members of my own group that I'm in that would like to see something slightly different. And this is where the problem comes, because everybody has their own agenda. Now, the one thing that I think that we've probably got to take a step back is that let's think about Blast for a minute. Okay, so for my sort of idea to work, we have to have a reduction in blast from 14 to 10 to create the gap in the calendar. So if I can just talk about blast, because I do think it's important context. I'd have 3 sixes, 10 group games, really straightforward. Quarterfinals, final, all played in one block, okay, before the 100, which gives a really good narrative to that competition, and it frees up that space to fit everything else in. Now, Australia have reduced the number of their Big Bash matches by 20% this winter. It's been their most successful BBL for probably 10 years. And the other interesting thing is, whilst the number of matches have been reduced by 20%, the total aggregate, not the average attendance, has increased by 20%. So 20% more people in aggregate are watching 20% fewer games. And the reason for that is because you've got a fairly short qualification period of 10 games. As you get towards the business end, before you qualify for quarterfinals and semi-finals, more teams have a chance of qualifying. So you always get to the last couple of games whereby they're all still in the mix, and it creates this huge amount of excitement. Whereas 14 games, by the time you get to games 11, 12, 13, 14, half of those teams are they're out effectively, and it just drags on too long. I just don't think there's no narrative behind it. So the challenge is, what I'm going to say here, from going from 14 to 10, is there are a bunch of my colleagues who say, well, that's our financial lifeline, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Now, my response to that is, with the money coming in the game from the 100, surely, this is a time to think strategically and long term rather than short term finances. Because quite frankly, the money you make from lose from 2 blast home games is an absolute pittance compared to the monies that are about to land from the 100. That's one thing. Secondly, if you play the Metro at the beginning of the season with all of your squad players available, apart from the superstars, the IPL superstars, which are few and far between, you're giving the members those 2 games back effectively, because they're not watching a development team in August. They've got the ability to start their summer of watching cricket, and they're all excited after the winter of watching what effectively would be not far off full squads. So I think that's the trade-off. That's why you have all these things hang together effectively. So that's why the blast and the Metro and all those combinations that I've spoken about, every single one of them are in 3 sixes. So the county championship is in 3 sixes, albeit the top 2 sixes are the ones that can win it. The blast would be 3 sixes with 10 group games, and the Metro will be in 3 sixes with 10 group games, albeit 2 phases.
It's funny actually, and Simon, I'm sure you've got a view on it. I mean, it's quite. I like the sort of symmetry of sixes, because 6 is the kind of key number in the game, isn't it? 6 balls in and over. A 6 is the maximum you can score off a ball as well. So I quite like that actually. Simon?
Well, no, I mean, it was going to be my question, actually, what do you do with the blast? And actually, you've answered the question, because I was thinking, well, championship, you go 12, possibly 13, you still need to reduce the season a bit more. But it seems to me that there does need to be a reduction in the amount of matches played, but of course there are counties who always say, and I can just hear Vic Marks on my shoulder here, with his Somerset hat on, saying, well, we all sell out for the blast, we don't want to reduce the number of blast games. So it did strike me that the money from the 100 sell-off is a way perhaps of mitigating that. I wonder whether we should take a break, Yoz, and talk about what you are going to do with the money from the 100. Is it going to come in? How much of it's going to come in? How do you see it being used around the game?
Yeah, that's a good idea. We'll take a quick break. And by the way, if you like this podcast, don't forget to follow us and tell your friends as well. We'll see you in a moment.
Okay then, Tim, the money from the 100 sell-off, where is it? When's it coming in? When do you expect it to come in? Okay, let's answer that question first, shall we? Let's go with that one first.
Yeah. Well, listen, obviously it's a fluid situation, but our expectation is that there'll be an amount of money fairly soon, hopefully the next month or two, which we're will be delivered to all of the counties on an unfettered basis, a small amount unfettered. Effectively, they can do what they want with it. And then the bigger chunk of money, if you like, is likely to arrive sort of September, October, November. And there are very fluid discussions at the moment around who controls the money, what restrictions there should be in place. Will every county have to have a reserve policy? Because one of the things I think that everybody's conscious of.
Just explain what you mean by reserve policy, Tim.
Well, effectively, you've got, enough money. If COVID hits, you've got enough money to survive, to pay your players, So depending on your balance sheet, Surrey may need a reserve of £10 million. Worcestershire might need £2.5 million. We may need £4 million. And it's, tucked away, can't be used. It's there for emergencies. We read a lot about the ECB reserves, and they were very healthy at one time, but they had to burn 100 million of those to get us through COVID, effectively, and they're rebuilding those now, which they clearly will do with the hundreds. So that's the reserve policy. It's an insurance policy, and the rest of it then. So the challenge is, again, for the ECB to say, right, you guys are all going to land somewhere between, I don't know, just say 20 million quid, 25 million quid. We don't want to go down the rugby route whereby 3 or 4 teams spend it all on players, race to the, bottom effectively, and they go bust, which has happened. So they're very conscious and clear about the fact that there should be some control over that money. And that's causing some tension because quite rightly the counties go, well, it's our money, it's our business, we should be able to, you should trust us to run our own business and spend our own money. And I think we'll get to a sensible situation whereby there'll be elements of control around it, and there'll be elements of the money that will be unfettered. So effectively, you can use it for what you want to use it for. So that's the discussion at the moment. Now, ostensibly, from my understanding with nearly all of my colleagues, is that we'll pay down debt. Because that's the most expensive. That's the most expensive thing. So there are certain clubs that still have debts with the ECB. That'll be cleared straight away before you even get your hands on the money. Then the rest of us have got debts with banks, or in our case, as Simon will know, the Durham County Council bailout from 2017. We still owe a couple of million quid on that, which is not a lot of money really in the bigger scheme of things, but nevertheless, they deserve their money back. It's non-interest bearing, that loan, so we're loath to pay it back before we need to pay it back for obvious reasons, because it can sit in our bank account earning interest. But nevertheless, they've been very good to us, so we would certainly look to do that. And I think a lot of other counties would get rid of all their expensive debt and probably, in fact, nearly all of their debt. So the idea is the counties are debt-free, they'll have reserves, and they'll still have plenty left as well to do what I would call projects that will give a return on investment and secure their revenues outside of cricket. Now, we're lucky we've got the hotel. That's clearly a project that I know will transform our balance sheet. It'll transform our net profits. It'll transform our turnover. And instead of facing into maybe a debt on the hotel of between 18 and 20 million pounds, we should be able to have a debt of half that, which will mean that our return on investment and our business case for that hotel is even stronger than it already is, because even with the 20 million debt, it will still deliver us over £1 million net profit a year.
This is a hotel on the opposite side of the ground to where the players change and the members sit on the Lumley side. Yeah.
Yeah.
Which will be built by when? When will it be built by?
Well, we're just waiting. We're right in the very, very final stages of planning. So 2 years, we think, from start to finish. So we'd like to get shovels in the ground at the end of the season, and then hopefully get it up, 15 months after that. That's the plan. So that's an example of a really good use of that money, because you're future-proofing the club and you're future-proofing our revenues, and you're not going to the ECB cap in hand. Now, we're fortunate. Other clubs are not so fortunate. They don't have the land. They don't have the need for the hotel. There's no silver bullet. Putting 5 million quid into a new 5,000-seater stand when you can't fill what you've got anyway doesn't seem to be a good use of that sort of monies. Open up a wine bar or whatever. They're all reasonably flaky projects, I think. So I think that the clubs who have not got the good fortune to be able to do an Old Trafford with a hotel, or a Durham or a Hampshire, etc., or a Sussex with what they're doing down there, they're going to have to think really long and hard about how they spend that money. With 20 million quid, you shove it in the bank and get 5% on it, and you're a club that struggled to make £150,000 a year. That doesn't feel like the worst thing to do in the world, by the way. So there'll be some clubs thinking, well, we've got a nice little ground. Yes, we can do various things to it to make the facilities much better for our members, etc. And we can improve our conference facilities and we can get more revenue there, but it's not a massive silver bullet. They may well then decide that, we'll take a more prudent view. So I guess what I'm saying is that each club will have their own opportunities. They'll have their own business model. Some will have some silver bullets. We think we've got one. Certainly Lancashire have proven that they've had one. Others will probably go, maybe, we need to think slightly differently. I mean, Worcestershire's a very good case in point, I think, because of the problems they've got with their ground.
Well, they should just open a rowing academy, I think, probably. Certainly in sort of April and May. Listen, I mean, we're going down to sort of, covering all sorts of other issues here. In fact, actually, Giles posted a thing to his members, Worcestershire members, the other day, talking about their plans and how they're looking for a new ground, but they still want to try and look at the possibilities to protect New Road from the flood invasion, find solutions to being able to still use that ground, but are still looking for somewhere else. I mean, just talk about Durham a bit more, because you've got that space there, and you've developed this kind of almost sporting ecosystem, which is sharing various facilities and ideas with football as well, and women's football, in fact. I mean, talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, so there's a really exciting project that hit the news last week. It was BBC, actually. And has gained the support of Kim McGuinness, who's the North East Mayor, and also Durham Council, whereby on the other side of our media centre, obviously there's an athletics track, there's 3G football pitch, grass rugby pitches, all the rest of it. And we've also got our women and girls nursery ground out there as well. So there is a plan afoot for Durham women's football to be given a long-term lease similar to the one that we've got here, to build a women's specific football stadium, capacity 5,000 people, which would be sort of brand new, state-of-the-art, new 3G pitches, which would be used for the community, and also very, very good training facilities, high performance centre, shared facility with ourselves, and changing rooms that point out to our women and girls nursery ground. So in simple terms, we'll have elite women's professional cricket here, we'll have elite women's professional football here, and we'll have obviously elite men's here as well as hosting international cricket. It becomes a sporting village, which will be it'll be the biggest investment ever in this part of the world. It will be an amazing opportunity for all our young boys and girls. It's not just about girls, but it's very much focused on women and girls sport because of the football and the cricket, which is incredibly exciting. And it's sort of not a pie in the sky investment because Durham women have one of only 23 licenses in the country, along with Liverpool and Manchester United. So the new Women's Premier League, the new deal with Barclays, the monetisation of women's football is the fastest growing women's team sport. It's way ahead of all the other women's team sports in terms of return on investment. I'm sure that the ECB, Claire and Beth are looking at women's football and going, that's where we need to be in 5 to 10 years' time. Football is the most popular game in the world, but they're starting to, really monetize it. So there are people very interested in funding that whole development over the back. So it's not one of those that you've drawn on a piece of paper going, wouldn't this be nice? I think it's a lot closer to reality. And you can imagine the Riverside Farm in Chester Street, what that would do to the community and all the young aspirational kids that want to play professional sport and all the young girls that are getting into cricket and football, as well as all the young boys as well. So I'm very excited that happens. Because it obviously helps with the hotel as well. It all hangs together. I can envisage that whole area at the back hosting brilliant summer festivals for football, residential festivals that we used to have in the old days. I mean, all of that, it's overwhelmingly a positive story, and the number of jobs and regeneration of this area, which, as has struggled. I think, I think if you're a visionary or not even that, you think, wow, that really would be groundbreaking for this part of the world.
Yeah, it's great, isn't it? Can I just pick up on that as one thing? I mean, because you talked about last year a relationship with the Saudis, the Prince's Investment Fund, which has had a big impact on Newcastle, obviously.
Yeah.
And you were talking about a big sort of tie-up with them. Is that part of this as well?
Well, it is, because they're obviously, they're interested in, obviously, football. They're interested in women's sport because of the stuff that they're trying to do in the kingdom in terms of, reinventing themselves and everyone's got a different view on that. And they're obviously heavily into Newcastle United. They're looking at building an enormous new stadium, St James's Park. Obviously put many hundreds of millions of pounds into that particular business. They are going to be launching Riyadh Air within the next 2 years. They're attempting to buy 49% of Newcastle Airport. You don't have to be a brain surgeon to work out that, the Emirates and Abu Dhabi and those airlines, Riyadh Air, is unlikely to settle for being second best. So you can see how the whole of the northeast could become an epicenter for investment, not just Saudi investment, because obviously, we all know that there are some challenges around, that lens, but Middle Eastern investment as well. So to answer your question, of course, there are conversations going on. Of course, the Saudis, as you know, have been reportedly in talks with Cricket Australia around cricket as well. Yeah, they have aspirations. You know about Live Golf, you know about the tennis, you know about the World Cup football, you know about the Olympic Games. So yeah, there's an awful lot going on. As with any of these things, you've got to look very carefully at the investment and who you get into bed with.
Can I just go back, Tim, just very briefly to the 100 money and the 100 sell-off, and just I think probably just articulate a question that a lot of what might be seen as traditional cricket fans have asked, and that is, okay, look, it's all very well the 100, but we're selling our game, we're selling our soul, we're selling August for a competition that wasn't here a few years back, and now we've kind of sold off all our teams as well. What do you say to those people?
Well, first of all, I do understand, that point of view. I've been a cricket lover for as long as I can remember, so I understand that. But I also understand the changing world that we live in and the finances, and trying to keep all lifeboats ashore. Or get all lifeboats ashore, and I mean all 18 counties managing to survive. Without significant investment, I think that highly unlikely we'd have 18 counties in 5 years' time. This gives us a real opportunity to reinvigorate and invigorate our domestic game along the lines of maybe what I talked about earlier, because I think we should be focused less on quantity and more on quality. And I've alluded to it. How do we create a world-class, first-class cricket competition that's the envy of the world, like the IPL is the envy of the short-form world? And I think we've got an opportunity to do that. I think without this investment, we wouldn't. So, I got into a little bit of trouble last year by using an ill-advised phrase, which obviously I regret. But I was trying to say, listen, if we don't make some of these radical changes and accept some trade-offs with a small reduction in cricket to create competitions that are regarded as best in class, we run the risk of not having anything at all, because clubs will go to the wall and the standards will drop and the best players won't want to play and they all go and play white ball cricket. Whereas, I know absolutely from speaking to the guys that are in the current England setup, their whole focus is on being brilliant test match cricketers. all the young kids that I speak to and the county players and all the rest of it, it's still the absolute pinnacle for them. Of course, they want to make lots of money in white ball, but I think without that money, Simon, to cut to the chase, I think we'd have been staring down the barrel in the future, and we'd have had, yes, of course, cricket is always going to be played in the UK, but what sort of standard, what sort of level, how much would the media be interested? Television rights, overseas players, all of the glory years of the past. I think we'd really struggle to create that. I think we would undoubtedly. There are big threats coming on. So I take the 100 as a positive. Okay, what we've got to do is make sure that what we fit in around that effectively, because that's the only way you can look at it, is world class. Okay, and let's play first class cricket at the end of April, during May, during June, during July, a little bit of August, and during the first period of September. Let's not play first class cricket in the starting on the 4th of April and ending on the 30th of September and pushing it to the edges, because that's not quality first class cricket. You may as well go and watch club cricket, and that's not saying club cricket is the same as first class cricket, but we are not doing ourselves justice or the players justice by making them play at that time of the season.
And one final one from me. Do you want to become 100 franchise in Durham? And if so, how close are you to making that a reality, do you think?
Well, we do, obviously. We obviously want to be in it, not just for the obvious financial gains, again, what it'll do for the area. Demographically, it works. Obviously, if you look at the country, if they're going to expand, and their plan is to expand, but who knows where that will end up. Logically, southwest and the northeast would be, where you'd put the new teams. We're ready to go because we've got an international class stadium. We've got investors that are already, those investors that didn't get through the first process with the ECB and missed out. A number of those obviously are already interested and talking, and how do we get a foot in the door? It's like a put option, on a share option, if you like. If we help you with the hotel, can we have first dibs if you ever get to the stage? There's all those sort of conversations going on, and I've got no doubt they're going on down at Somerset. They're going on at Gloucestershire. I'm sure that there are conversations going on, because everybody's got an eye on 2028 when maybe the competition will expand. And of course, it doesn't need to go from 8 to 10. It can go from 8 to 9. It doesn't affect the competition, because they play 8 games now and they have this local derby. Well, there's no such thing as a local franchise derby. That's rubbish, to be honest. You could have 9 teams and still play the 8 games. But I rather think the 100 that we see this summer, the 100 that we see in 3 years' time will look nothing like it. I think that's the reality of it. I don't know what it's going to look like, but it won't look the same. And I think we need to face into that. And we'd like to be part of that.
I'm just looking actually at Cricketer magazine has made you a predicted number 2, second in the First Division this year, for Surrey to win it again. So I guess the key matches, and this will sit well with your plan actually, the key matches are your 2 games against Surrey. One is in June and one is in July. So you're in a way, you're going to warm up for the season with 7 games against one or 2 of the lesser sides. And then the crux of the county championship is going to be June and July when you play Surrey. I'm looking forward to those already.
Yeah, well, I wouldn't say lesser. There's some really, really good sides in,
sure.
Essex, Somerset, Hampshire. I think
Surrey are the team to beat, aren't they? Consistently.
Without a doubt. Surrey are the team to beat. Yeah, there's no doubt about that. And listen, we built a squad here that can definitely compete. We were disappointed last year where we finished. We think we should have done much better than that. And there were times during the season that, 1 or 2 games. We've got 1 or 2 challenges first game with overseas player availability. We've got injuries. Can you believe you've got injuries already without even playing a game? You know, you think you've got 9 bowlers and
Too hard a pre-season it is. You should just turn up and have a few games of golf before you start the season. There's too much kind of strenuous stuff pre-season nowadays. Listen, we must let you go actually because we've covered a lot of ground there. I mean, I just want to say well done to Durham really because 2 years ago you were second division, obviously relegated because of that points deduction. You climbed your way up. First place a couple of years ago and then held your own with fifth last season. So, great stuff and good to see the gradual progression. I'm excited from, lots of points of view, both on and off the field, what the Durham story will throw up next.
Yeah, no, thanks, Simon. I think the other thing as well, in the midst of all of that turmoil that the club went through, we've continually produced England players. Potts and Cast, the sort of latest two, but there's a long history before that. And then we've got a young guy, Ben McKinney, who's very exciting. And he may well, I hate to put the kibosh on any young player, but he got a brilliant 100 for the Lions down in Australia. I was in Australia at that time, and that was they hammered us. Australia hammered the Lions, and he got 110 off 110 balls. And I think he's got something, and I think a lot of people think he's got something. But at the end of the day, starts the season off, got to get runs, and yeah, I'm sure. And listen, put it this way, he's in the right place to be noticed. I think that's probably the best thing to say.
Oh, they're definitely looking at him, all right.
They are. Yeah, they are.
Yeah.
Well, listen, thank you, Tim, anyway, and great work, and good luck with your negotiations with the other people on your various development committees. I'd love to be a fly on the wall at some of that, actually. I mean, I suppose sometimes, do you sometimes want to actually throw something at the wall in those meetings? Do you get a bit irate, or do you have to try and hold it all in?
Well, I actually don't hold it in at all, to be honest. And if you speak to Neil and Steve and Ash and one or two of the others on that, they know that obviously I could be a little bit combustible, but I'm passionate about it, and they're passionate about it as well. And I think it's really important that we can debate these things. We're certainly never going to fall out. And yeah, listen, they they know what I'm thinking, and they know that I'm always likely to come up with something a little bit more.
You need a disruptor like you occasionally, don't you? Definitely. So all power to your mouth and elbow, etc. Listen, we must go, but we'll do a proper preview of the county championship sometime early next week. But in the meantime, Tim Bostock, good luck for the season for Durham and for you, and Simon, good luck with your commentary on the next IPL match.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate the time.
Yeah, thanks very much, Tim. Thanks very much for listening, everybody. Okay, good.